Today we're actually going to be seeing Halacha Aleph and Beis, Simpeal, Tevav Halacha Aleph and Beis. The past two times we prepared, which is to say we spoke about how to know whether a specific bird is kosher. And Memela, that was from Simon Pei Beis really. But Memela, once you know whether a specific bird is kosher, then of course the eggs that it lays are kosher also. That's the most typical case. A person wants to know if an egg is kosher, he looks at the bird. These 12 halachas, Aleph and Beis in Peva, we're going to do them in pieces, not in one big piece like that. In halacha Aleph and Beis, that talks about what happens if I just have an egg. I'm walking down the street, I'm walking in the forest, and I find an egg, and I want to know if the egg is kosher. I haven't a clue which bird it came from, and I want to know if the bird is kosher. Okay, I'm going to read all at once first, and then we're going to do parts at a time. I might as well read it together. So the Shulchan Aruch says like this: Simoni beim lahaki behem. Okay, I'm not going to read it inside. We're going to do it in pieces. It's not going to work like that. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch says like this. If you want to know if an egg is kosher, he says like this: Im roisha echad kad v'ogol, v'roisha sheni chad v'ogol, v'chelba mibachutz v'chelma mibafnim. I'm going to tell you what all those things mean in a second. After shu beitzes oif tamei, after shu beitzes oif tar. So Shulchan Aruch tells us that by looking at an egg, there's no way to know that the egg is kosher. Okay, we're going to see in a second. There's a way to know that the egg is not kosher, but there's no way to know that it's kosher. If it has these simanim, which I'm going to show you in a second, if it has these simanim, then it could be it's kosher, could be it's not kosher. But we'll see later in Shulchan Aruch, he says there's ways to know that the egg is by looking at it that it's not kosher. Okay, so what are they? This is what a regular egg looks like. It's a chicken egg, regular chicken egg. It happens to be a brown one, but that's unimportant. It's a regular chicken egg. So it says if rosh echad kad v'ogel, if one side of it, eggs have an ovalish sort of shape. So one of them is wide and rounded, and the rosh hasheni chad v'ogel, and the other side is rounded but pointy. Okay, like a chicken egg. So then, and the third symbol is v'chelman mibachutz v'chelman bifnim. If the chelban, that means the white part, as in chol like is white. Okay, so the chelban mibachutz, if the white part of the egg is on the outside, the chelman bifnim, and the yellow part is on the inside, then if it has those three simanim, then you have no way of knowing. It might be a kosher egg, it might be a treif egg, and you have no way of knowing. So then the Shulchan Aruch goes back, when we go back to what the Shulchan Aruch said in the previous din. So I'm not reading to you inside. I'm reading on here. What's the din? After shu beitzes of tamei, after shu beitzes of tahar, lefikach shoyel tzayid yisrael oigai. Therefore, you have to ask someone who's a professional, who knows what he's doing. He's a trapper. Hamoicher. Imam l'shloich plinihu one makir choice of taharu samachalav. If he tells you it's a specific bird, I mean, he doesn't just say this is a kosher bird. He says this is a duck. He says, and he tells you a specific kind that it is, and you know that bird is kosher. Then you could trust him. And we talked about this when we talked about it when we went about alcoholic beverages. Why you trust him and when you trust him. Okay, that's not for today. But there's a case you could trust him. Certain cases. The he says, yeah, it's a kosher bird. He won't tell you what kind of bird. He doesn't tell you what it is. Then in the Samachalav, you don't believe him. Lefikach, Mechaber says, okay, we'll get to the Mechaber in a second. The rest of the Mechaber. Okay, so for now, we have this egg, a traditional looking egg that's wider on one side and narrow on the other side. It could be it's kosher, it could be it's treif. So for example, we have over here, which one is this? These are duck eggs. Okay, these are blue. Well, this is not a good example because it doesn't look so good. I'll give you this one. Is a pheasant. Okay, this is a pheasant egg. Okay, so this egg is wider on the bottom and pointier on the top. Okay, so then that's a simon of an egg that could be kosher, could be treif. Okay, this one is a partridge. Okay, it has a look of what a usual egg looks like. So, but we have no way of knowing from that whether it's kosher or treif. Okay, that's not a simon. It's a simon that it could be one way or the other. Okay, but then the Shulchan is like this. Well, he said before. Im shnei rosheh kadin. Okay, so kadin means that they're wide. If both sides are wide, or kadin, if both sides are pointy, or the yolk and the white are reversed in the order. So that's a simon that it's a treif bird. Okay, so what does that mean? So im shnei rosheh kadin, if both sides are round. So my example of that is an ostrich egg, which is basically round like a ball. Okay, so both sides are round in a wide way. I mean, there's no pointier side to this egg. Okay, it's actually an ostrich egg. It's actually from the Torah. It says that the basayana. Okay, actually we learn at the din that eggs are treif from the din of basayana. So this is an ostrich egg to basayana. So shnei rosheh kadin. If both sides are, I think this is an example of that. Both sides are rounded, are wide. I mean, it's essentially like a ball. Then that's the same. That's a treif bird. Okay, there's a brown other eggs like that also. Okay, if shnei rosheh kadin. Okay, they're both pointy. Now this one was harder. So I think that this is an example of it. This is a maleo bird egg. A maleo bird lives in, I think it's pronounced Sulawesi, and it's someplace near Indonesia, someplace in Indonesia. Okay, and it has these very unusual eggs. It happens to be it's an unusual bird anyhow. It buries his eggs in the dirt. Okay, it's an unusual egg. It's a whole way that it raises its eggs. These are very big eggs. These, what? That I don't know. But this egg, so when I'm looking for an egg that's Shneir, that's what I can come up with. Okay, it's not, I didn't have an easy time finding one that was too pointy side. Again, pointy as in what we think of a narrow egg on the top. I couldn't find, like once I came to a point, I thought maybe this was his, I don't really know. Okay, I was having a hard time with what that means is. And then the din says, or there's the chalmi b'chutz, the chalmi b'fnim. The white was on the inside and the yellow was on the outside. Okay, I couldn't find any eggs like that, and I spoke to an expert in eggs. From I forgot which he was from. Some expert in eggs, and I said to him, "Could you tell me?" I read in a book about this, an older book about this kind of thing, and he says, for life of him, he said he never heard of such an egg, and he says physically he doesn't know how it's possible, how it could form just the way eggs form. We're going to talk about that maybe next time, a few times, at how eggs form. He says that for life of him, he could not imagine any such thing of an egg that has the yellow on the outside and the white inside. He never heard of such an egg, of any birds like that, and he can't imagine how it could happen either. Okay? Now, so not only do we not know it, so that's just okay. If it would happen, it would happen. The din says if you find such an egg, it would be trade. What's more complicated is the Gemara of Chulin on Daf Samach Daled gives the impression that you should crack open an egg, and if you see the yellow on the inside, it's kosher, and the yellow on the outside, it's treif, as if that was a normal thing to see. Like you would see it, and there would be a sim that it was kosher or treif, as if that was the way you would know. You didn't have an egg, you don't know where it came from. Crack it open. The Gemara has such a tzad that you can do that. And if no one ever saw it, it's hard to say what the Gemara saw. Okay.
And what does it mean? That you cook it first or nothing? You have to do anything.
Cook it first. Well, what do you think that if you cook it, you mean that the egg would spread to everything? Maybe there's such a thing. I mean, there's such a thing. People have a trick on how they get the yellow through on the outside. It's like a chop. But if it's But that they do with chicken eggs. They don't do that with. They don't get funny eggs to do it. It's just a trick. But maybe it means something else. We don't know what it means. I haven't a clue. I tried to figure out this. I spoke to a guy, an expert in eggs, and said to him, "Can you tell me what egg they're talking about?" And we have no idea. Okay, so I don't know what it is. Okay, anyhow, so back to the. I think it's the next slide. So the Shulchan Aruch says like this. So back to Shulchan Aruch. Lefikach, what we read. Lefikach ein lechem beim in oivdik kachavim. Ellen can have matroisan, okay, but yeshem tfias ayin shein beitze oif ploiniv tar. So you can only buy an egg from the person unless you know for sure that he recognizes them and he has a tfias ayin, and okay, and it's a kosher. All right, fine. Now then it sticks in. I put it in small letters. It's not the Ramah. It's a Shulchan Aruch. Vein chashem shemehin beitze trefer nevela. In Mishnah we're going to talk about the halacha test. Okay, just hold that. Okay, that maybe it's in the nevela trefer. Just hold that. That's how it's in small letters. But then halacha beis Shulchan Aruch says like this. That's all we did have Gemara. And the Shulchan says, "Achshav noigim likach beim b'stam b'kol adam." We buy eggs from anybody. L'fisha ein beitze oif tamei motzi. We don't have treif eggs around. Think about it. You go to the supermarket. What do they sell? They sell chicken eggs. Okay, so we have all the regular eggs. Only eggs that they sell are eggs that we know are kosher anyhow. So that whole din, the whole halacha aleph that says you can only buy eggs with simanim and the guy telling you and the right kind of a person, all of that doesn't apply anymore. And you can buy regular eggs. L'fisha ein beitze oif tamei motzi. Okay, now on that the Ramah says, the Ramah just clarifies. The Ramah clarifies. That's talking about regular eggs like chicken eggs or duck eggs, goose eggs. These are goose eggs. Okay, these big ones are goose eggs. Okay, or goose eggs. Or kiyotzabai is what the Ramah says. Also means when the Shach brings it means is duck eggs. Okay, these ones over here are duck eggs. These ones over here are duck eggs, and so are these ones over here. These four over here. Okay, and these two guys over here. These are different sized duck eggs. These are duck eggs. Okay, they don't look exactly like chicken eggs, and these are obviously much bigger than chicken eggs. What?
They look like chicken eggs to me.
They look like chicken eggs here, right? Okay. Well, if you look at eggs for long enough, then they look a little different. I actually won because these sure look to me like they're pointy on both sides. But anyhow, better not answer that question. So these are goose eggs, and these are blue duck eggs, and these are regular duck eggs in different sizes, and these are also two duck eggs. Okay. So those you could buy. But you can't buy. Well, ein lechem beitzim nerfus she'en shlichim yosef nerfus tveim asher b'siman k'moshin aspar. Otherwise, you can't buy it. So, for example, the last egg over there, this fat one, I think it's a pretty egg. Okay, this is a turkey egg. Okay, so they're not matzah because turkeys don't lay so many eggs. So the eggs that they lay tend to go to raise more turkeys. the turkeys are kosher, but we're not used to seeing these around, so they should have to have a raya that you have to know, according to halacha aleph, that the egg is really kosher
The
egg.
eggs are matzah or the birds themselves are matzah?
Well, the point is the eggs are matzah, so you know what the egg looks like, and it's common, and you know that these are kosher eggs. So turkey eggs, there are turkey eggs, but they don't sell them. It's not a common thing to do. You could buy specially, but you can't buy regular turkey eggs because they need them. They don't lay so many eggs, so they save them to actually raise more turkeys. Okay, and if, for your curiosity, that one's a peacock, and that one over there is a peacock. Yeah, we can play with them afterwards.
Which one's a peacock?
That one over here, this one over here is a peacock, and this one is a pheasant. We talked about many of these birds last time, but whether they do or don't have them, this is for most of them don't. There's a pheasant, and this is a partridge. Okay, and we'll get to the little guys later on. Okay, the little guys are important. This is a partridge. Okay, so all these eggs will have the shape like they're supposed to of that could be kosher or treif. What's this one again? This is the pheasant.
No, what are you looking at?
This is the paper where they give it to you, where they sold you the egg.
Oh,
People
you bought like a kit?
these guys came together. These guys came separately. So these people gave me a thing. They told me which egg they're selling me. Okay. Anyhow. Okay. So we're going to talk more about the Ramah in a second, in a minute. Okay. So when we have a regular chicken egg, the Shulchan Aruch tells you buy a chicken egg. You go to the street and you see eggs in the supermarket, and you see a plain egg there. You could assume that it's a kosher egg. That's what he says. Even though Halacha said all kinds of rules of when you could buy Halacha, he says that noig and likach bein b'stam mikol adam. You can buy plain eggs from anybody because you assume they're kosher. Okay. So now we're going to talk about some eggs that are not your everyday eggs. That's what today's topic is about. Okay. And that was like this. The first like this. The Pri Chadash brings from the Sefer Shar Shemayim that says you shouldn't buy eggs that have 2 yolks, or if it lays 2 eggs on the same day. Okay, if the chicken lays 2 eggs on the same day, you shouldn't buy them. Okay, he says you shouldn't eat those eggs. So, well, I'll come to in a second, maybe why. I don't know why. He says you shouldn't buy those eggs. But then this Pri Chadash brings that the scientists say that there's nothing wrong with those eggs. Okay, they're just regular. They're unusual, but there's nothing wrong with them. And he throws in some other ones that the scientists say that it was okay. There are very tiny eggs that chickens lay. They're called fairy eggs. Okay, and they have eggs that get laid without a yolk. Well, they're eggs that they're one egg inside of another egg. Okay, and so the Pri Chadash says, the scientists say that they're just a little unusual, but there's nothing unhealthy or dangerous or anything about that. But the Pri Chadash says you should be machmir, you should not eat any of those eggs. Okay, so the Pri Chadash says. The Aruch HaShulchan also brings such a thing, and he says the people who are machmir about this shita is because of the tzavor of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Okay, what does it say in the tzavor of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid about this? Nothing. It says like this. This is what it says in the tzavor of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid about the closest we come to saying about the Aruch HaShulchan. Look over there, you'll see that he says. This is what he says. He's like this: Parah she'teled shnei agolim yachad. If a parah who gives birth to twins, or called davar she'ein roguliyas, or something else that's unusual. If you're going to go, should tell it bays beyond echad, like if a chicken lays 2 eggs on one day, which is one of the things that the Pri Chadash had said that you maybe shouldn't eat. So what does he say you should do? Tzarach l'shachtem yad. You should check the mother. Okay? He doesn't say anything about eating the child, eating the egg. He doesn't say anything about eating the egg. But Kinereh, that the Aruch HaShulchan understood, is that anytime you have something unusual like that, this is connected the scientist. The scientist said it's just something that happens. Don't worry about it. Not a big deal. Okay? The Pri Chadash said you shouldn't do it. But the scientist said it's not a big deal, and I think it should be machmir. So this is just a raya that I guess that's not like the scientists. I guess that he's trying to show that not like what the scientists think, and therefore you shouldn't eat it. So before we move on, you know there's a big difference of opinion between poskim about whether we should be choishes for Yehuda Chassid. I'll tell you some of the names. Some Sefer says you don't worry about it at all. And the Yehuda says it's only for his people and his family. And Aruch HaShulchan says Yitaka should be makbid on it. Rav Moshe says it's only negate to people who care about it. But if you don't care, you don't care. Yeah, in general. But you should know that in sprinkled different places, well, in Shulchan Aruch it's brought in different places. Parts of it are brought. Like for example, one of them that I don't think it does, but important to Ramah, the Ramah says there are people who have a minhag that they don't shech ducks in Teves and Shvat, unless they eat a piece of that bird that they just shechted. Okay, the shechet has to do it because there's 1 hour during those months that's dangerous to do it, and you have to eat a piece of the heart or another part. You have to eat a piece of it, so you don't shech ducks in Teves and Shvat except if you eat some of it. Okay, I have a feeling. Because there's an hour during those months that's dangerous if you shecht it and you don't eat from it, and therefore they don't shecht the whole Tevis and Shvat from Yehuda Chassid. They're not to take shech ducks during Tevis and Shvat. I don't think that anybody follows that, but you know. Okay, but I'm saying there are more bring this. So there are parts of the tzavah that are brought in different places, and big to do whether you should be makbid or not. Okay, so the thing is, on the other side, there's a Minchas Yaakov who says not to worry about these eggs, and I assume the Minchas Yaakov is a Pirush on the document on the Teres Chatas. It's a Pirush on Hilchos Pesach also on Teres Chatas the Ramah. So he says you have to be makbid, and I think that most people are not makbid on it. And if you cracked an egg and there were 2 yolks in it, I don't think most people are makbid tonight. Again, because there's been such a thing that people shouldn't do it. If that's the most common that people would find is 2 yolks. Okay, the tiny eggs we're not going to find. What?
Kids love it. So yeah,
Yeah, right. If you find the baby eggs, the tiny eggs, or the ones that have yolks, they don't get sold. They're going to be kicked out before they get to you.
My impression was that nowadays they sort of trick the chickens into laying more eggs. So they probably lay more than 1 egg a day.
Right, that's true. Because they do lay. They can lay eggs more than once a day. We're going to find out, I think it's in 2 times or maybe 3 times, about how long it takes to lay an egg. It really takes more than a day to lay an egg. But they, with the lights, play around with them and make them lay more. Yeah, but so Rabbi Yehuda Chassid said you should chef the chicken. That wouldn't look very well. Wouldn't be very business way. Okay. Another kind of egg, another unusual egg that we have is, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Araucana. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Okay? An Araucana chicken. You may not have ever seen the chicken, but you probably saw the result of the chicken. What's unusual is it comes from South America, and it's a kind of chicken. It looks a little different than regular chickens, but what people want about that chicken is that it lays eggs that are green or blue. Okay? You never saw that? Okay, well, that's because we're Jewish. They call them the Easter egg chicken. No, there are birds that actually lay chickens that lay green and blue eggs, and we don't have them started at the kosher. They come from South America, and they only became popular, noticed 100 years ago in the rest of the world. But so we don't have them started at the kosher. So if you see if you see the chicken, you should eat the chicken. But the birds themselves, if you remember, we talked about last time, the past 2 times, about Atypical, who says that if they mate with regular chickens that we have them served for, and produce viable children, then those are kosher. That the Masar transfers them also, and these birds do that. No one's ever thought about. I know of shechting them to eat them, but you should know. We're going to talk about it in a second. There were hashgachas that allowed their eggs. Okay, that let their eggs be served for as kosher based on Atypical and based on other factors like that. Okay, so you should just know. Okay, but those are not regular eggs. But they come from this funny chicken. Any chicken eggs that are blue or green, unless the much painted them, those eggs are from these special birds.
How do you explain that discrepancy? They won't allow the chicken to...
I'm going to explain to you. You're going to get to it in a second. You'll understand better why I'm saying you have to wait a second. Okay, our next bird, duck eggs. Okay, so duck eggs. The Ramah says, after the Mechaber said, now they should buy all regular eggs because they're all kosher. The eggs that they sell in the supermarket are all kosher, which is like today, chicken eggs that they sell are from kosher eggs. Okay, so the Ramah says, "V'dafka v'beim hashrichim tahainu beitzas tanagolim or avazos ukiyotze behem." That should be highlighted also. And the kiyotze behem means is ducks also. Okay? And avazos means geese, and kiyotze behem means bar avazos, which means ducks. So those are the only ones you could buy. Okay, so the question is like this. For us, today, if I went out to the store and I went to buy these goose eggs, okay? If this was a real egg, okay, could I eat this egg? Okay, can I go ahead, if I bought this egg today, the Ramah says if you buy goose eggs, you're allowed to eat them. Okay, so there's 2 problems with that. Okay, the avazos, the goose eggs. There's 2 problems with that. One is, goose eggs are not matzui beinenu. Okay, in his day, I guess they were matzui, right? I guess they just had geese walking around like we have geese in the park, and they walked down, they found the eggs, and they ate them. So they knew that the goose eggs were kosher, okay? But goose eggs are not matzui beinenu, so he says we're allowed to buy them because then the ones that are all around, well, that's not a good example anymore. We have chicken eggs, that's matzui, but goose eggs are not matzui. And the second is, we actually know that there are geese whose eggs we wouldn't eat. That is, we talked about the Muscovy duck and certain other geese. Okay, so for the duck egg, here's a duck egg. Okay, so when I said to the people who sold me this egg, I said, "Can you tell me what breed this egg comes from? Which breed this duck egg comes from?" They said, "No." They said, "It could be mallard, kosher, or Muscovy, not kosher." Okay, they said, we don't know. Usually the mallard, they tend to be mallard, but latafka, we don't really know. Now, part of why they don't know Why do they know? Is because we're used to chickens who lay eggs all year round, but a lot of birds, like ducks and geese, I believe only lay eggs in the spring and the summer. Okay, so if you make your order in the winter, they have no idea where they got this egg from. You know, when they laid the eggs, they blew them out. They got rid of the yolk, and who remembers where they got the thing from? And they have a big farm full of how many birds they have. So should we be samech? The Ramah says you could eat beim hashrichim like chicken eggs and goose eggs and duck eggs. But what about these eggs? Well, first of all, they're not matzah, and second is we know ones that we wouldn't eat the bird. Okay, we wouldn't eat the bird of this because maybe it's from a muscovy duck. So why would I eat this egg? Why would the Ramah be makel that you could eat this egg? So it turns out that this question, almost exactly this question, is in the Pri Megadim. Okay, this shayla that I'm asking you, whether you eat goose eggs and duck eggs nowadays, is a shayla of the Pri Megadim. It says like this. So this Ramah says, you can base this on Goyim Marabosses. The Pri Megadim says like this. He says, V'inei, okay, there are people who hold that you're not allowed to eat geese and ducks that have black beaks. Okay, think about the Canadian geese that walk around our parks, okay, with a black beak. Okay, there are some people who hold, and that's a shayla, there's a Daki Chuvas and Piska Chuvas about whether, all kinds of shittas, whether you can eat the geese and the ducks that have black beaks. Okay, that's a shayla. There are people, now, people still go around buying and then eating duck and goose eggs, even though it might come from those eggs, from those ducks and geese that have the black beaks. So I just told you some people hold that you're not allowed to eat them, and even so, people buy those things. So that's a question: is that okay or is it not okay? There are Ramah saying you can buy them, you can buy the goose eggs, but he says, wait a second, but we have geese that we don't eat. We have geese that some people hold that because they have the black beaks in our kosher. And when you look at this, do you have any idea if this came from one with a black beak? How would you know if it came from a black beak? What's the difference? An egg's an egg. Okay, it looks like a goose egg. So he says...
See, that's the point. The point is that there's no requirement from the start of the egg. So once the egg has simonic kashrus, so then...
There's no simonic kashrus. There's simonim that could be kosher or not kosher. It's neutral. Right, so then, it's okay. So then he's going to talk about stuff. We didn't get the answer yet. That's the bottom of the screen. So, okay, so that question is the same question that we asked, which is, if I pick up this, is this from a mallard duck, which is kosher, or is it from a musky duck, which you wouldn't eat the bird? So how do I know when I bought? So the Ramah says you could buy duck eggs, but did he mean this egg? Did he mean this? Or did he mean only in Echleis in Prague, where those eggs are available? So the Pri Megadim says three things. Okay, he says three things. He's supposed to say three things. He says, I'll read it one at a time. He says, it's okay. Why? He says, many people hold that these birds with the black beaks are kosher. So we're being machmir, but there's lots of people hold that they're modot against. He says, he says, even though we're machmir, he says, you only have to be machmir about the chicken. You don't have to be machmir about the eggs. I'm going to explain these both in a second. He says, and another thing is, the ain't shech she'etilu bein ben habriyas. Those kind of birds, the ones with the black beaks, they don't lay their eggs in places where people are, so you don't have to worry about that. Don't be cautious that you got one of those birds, the eggs from one of those birds, because the ones that we see around are not those ones. Okay, so let's talk about these three things and see if they apply to us. Okay, the first one is yesh kamadei shehen atzmi mutar. There are many sheets that hold it to mutar. And of course, that applies to our birds. Think about musky duck, which pumped out. Many people held it as mutter. But even besides the specific sheet that held its mutter, all ducks and geese, the Machaber told us, that we saw it in some papers, the Machaber said, if it has a wide beak and webbed feet, then the Machaber holds they're all kosher. It's automatically they're kosher because it can't be there. And the Ramah says, well, machmir. But there's for sure, yesh kamadei not from the term. Svardim would eat it like this in a second because it's for sure, they hold that that's good enough, and we don't need to have a specific Masar on that bird. Okay? So for sure, our ducks and geese all are going to qualify for that. So we're good on that. That reason applies to us. The second reason, the green reason. Okay? So he says the minig that we only eat birds if they have a Masorah only applies to the bird itself and not to the egg. Okay? So he doesn't say why. Okay? He doesn't say why that should be. Rav Shachta thought that the reason was, he wasn't explaining Pri Megadim, he just said it by himself, but Rav Shachta thought the reason was that the Isser on eating an egg is not as strong as eating the bird itself. the yoytze from the bird, what? Rosh Hashanah said that the issue of eating the yoytze of an egg, the yoytze of a treif animal, is not as serious as the act of the issue of eating the animal itself. And therefore, if that's true, therefore we have a minute to mach on the bird itself, because that's more serious issue, but not for the yoytze. Okay?
Why is there
So, what's the svek?
Maybe the bird itself is mutter.
Okay.
If the bird is not mutter, maybe the svek came from a bird that is mutter.
So that you're saying that's part of what he's saying. It's svek. Maybe it's from a kosher bird, and maybe it came from the kosher bird, and maybe it came from the muscovy duck, and the musky duck is kosher anyhow. Okay, that's a good question. I don't know enough about svek. Maybe that doesn't qualify because it's really shy. Is it a kosher bird? I'm not sure.
What is his marker?
So his marker is you must have been absent that day because when we learned.
How long ago?
When we learned about cheese, we saw there's a shayla in Nachronim whether it's true. Is it true that the yoytze is the same isser as the thing itself, or less of an isser? And it happens to be, and what you mean to say is, because we saw over there the Pri Megadim himself holds it's the same isser. Okay, so L'shitasa, this couldn't be the pshat in the Pri Megadim. That's probably what you meant to say. It's not pshat in the Pri Megadim, because the Pri Megadim, it's in Sim Pei Aleph, says that it's not, that they have the same isser, but they hold that it's not. So Rosh Hashanah was going with that kind of an approach of the yoytze has a less of an isser than the Isser itself, than the thing itself, and therefore that could be an explanation of this. Okay, but I told you he wasn't saying the Pri Megadim because he would have remembered that. So she tells you that's not true. But there's another hesber. The simpler hesber is this is a minute. Okay, the din of the Gemara is that if you have these simanim, you can know a bird is kosher. You have to remember we had how many simanim we have to have. There are 4 simanim, and if it has those simanim, the right mix of them, then the bird is kosher. So then later on, after the Gemara, people came up with a minute to avoid birds because they were afraid it was going to be a dirus and they wouldn't know about it, so they would avoid certain birds. Okay, so that's a minute. Well, minig is what people do. But if the minig is on the bird, the minig is on the bird. That doesn't mean the minig was on the egg. The minig developed that people stopped eating birds unless they had a misarah. No problem. But people kept eating goose eggs. So the fact that, okay, in Minhadin it's not also. Minhadin, all those geese have the simanim to make them kosher, they're good, simanim-wise they would be kosher, so there's a minig for the bird, but there wasn't a minig for the egg. Okay, that's not saying the first way I told you was more like a din to say that it's a lesser isser, so we don't have such a minig on that. It's like a minig is a minig. A minig is what people do. So if people don't do it, then they don't do it. Then they weren't machman on the eggs. Okay, people, like Rama says, everybody eats duck and goose eggs that they find in the street. Okay, so the new example is not any different. If either one of those pshatim would tell us that our duck and goose eggs are also okay. Okay, so when I said to you beforehand about the blue and green eggs, I don't know how to pronounce it, Araucana or something like that, those eggs, the reason why that hashgacha said that they would give hashgacha on the eggs, partially because of Abba Nezer, who says if they breed then it's a right that it's kosher, but partially because the minig to need a Masorah is on the bird itself. We don't have to say there's a minig on the egg also. Okay? Now the last thing he said was that I don't know what call that, it's the light blue, the bluish color. The Pri Megadim had a third reason. He said, the ain't shkir shatilu ben habriyas, that has nothing to do with us. Okay, I have no idea where muscovy and mallard ducks lay their eggs. None of them lay their eggs in my house. So what I mean is they're not more much than another one. So the third reason is not going to apply to us. Okay, so if we were just right over here, if this is all we were seeing from the Pri Megadim, then we would probably say that we could buy the goose eggs because he says 3 reasons why it's okay. 2 of them apply to us, and besides we would say it's fine to buy the eggs. It's fine to buy the eggs, but. What do you say?
Is there a butt coming?
Of course there's a butt. Doesn't that sound like there was a butt coming? The problem is, we're missing something here. Okay. Remember, what did the Shulchan Aruch say of the eggs that we're allowed to buy? He said, we're allowed to buy all eggs. Even Halacha Aleph said, don't buy any eggs unless you have all kinds of proofs that it's a kosher egg. Halacha Bey says, we can buy eggs because trade eggs are not around. What does he mean when he says they're not around? He means is that if you walk into the supermarket tomorrow and you open up the big box and you saw this, you go, that's strange. That's not the egg I'm used to buying. Right? You know what a chicken egg looks like. And if you walked in and it came out looking like this, you'd say, that's not a chicken egg. Okay? So that is to say is you have a certain amount of tvias ayin already to look at an egg and say, that's a regular egg. That's a regular egg. This one is a strange one. If you saw this, you wouldn't buy it. But you see the regular egg, you say, okay, I know that's a regular egg. That's a chicken egg. Okay? No one's slipping in turkey eggs in there because they all look like the egg. I'm used every day I see eggs. This one looks like a regular egg to me. Okay? But we don't have duck and turkey and goose eggs matzui. Part of what's making it mutter here is because when a person in Prague saw the egg that looked like this, he said, yeah, that's a goose egg. Everybody knows a goose egg. If I would have told you that this was a partridge egg, would you know the difference? Who would know the difference? So, but to them, they think, oh, this is a goose egg. Okay, so the part of the hector over here is because when you look at the egg, you know that it's from a goose. So the prim says, wait a second, but maybe it's from a certain kind of goose that we don't eat.
Why are you saying that? Why do you think that the Matzah effect is like refresh by calling certain others? That there aren't trained animals Matzah in a flock, so there aren't trained birds Matzah in society that their eggs are being put to the market.
See, that's the whole thing. Okay, I didn't understand it. That I understood that Matzah means it, and therefore, maybe even said it. I might not have made it up. But I understood to mean this. Matzah means to say we're starting off on a good leg. We're starting off knowing that everybody who sees this knows it's a goose egg. No one thought this was an ostrich egg. Everyone knew this was a goose egg. So if this is a goose egg, then basically I know that's a kashrus egg. I'm already starting off way ahead of myself, as opposed to if I walk and I saw this, I say, I don't know what this is. Now I have to try to figure out if it's kashrus. Now I need the rayas. Okay, but all that doesn't apply to us because for us, we don't recognize goose eggs, and like you said, this looks like a chicken egg. Well, it doesn't really look like a chicken egg, but looks enough like you like a chicken egg, so you have no idea what you're getting, okay? So I don't think that we would be able to be medical based on that, based on people. Okay, the last egg we need to deal with, which is actually a common question we get, which is quail eggs, okay? So I told you last time I'm not going to talk to you about quail, because I'm going to wait till now, because quails are these very small birds, excuse me, and it's not nobody except for Yisrael Goldstein, but nobody commercially is I know of is shechting quails. It's not like a commercial thing. You say shecht turkeys and chickens and ducks and geese, but people don't shecht quail commercially. So the shayla is so much what they're small. I don't know if it's worth anything, but right. So but it's not a commercial thing that people say. But quail eggs you can buy in the market. Okay? You can go to the supermarket. You have to go to the right supermarket. But you go to the supermarket and buy quail eggs. So you have all kinds of supposed health benefits. So quail is the way we translate slav. The Gemara said there are 4 kinds of slav, but anyway, we translate slav as quail. So we all say, okay, well, slav is quail, so quail is kosher. Okay, obviously, it hasn't been given eating tray food to eat. We send them in the midbar tray food to eat. So obviously, send them kosher birds, so it must have been kosher. Okay, but the problem is like this. And there is a Masari. Actually, there is a Masari that quail are kosher. The problem is that we spoke about last time, where Moshe said, mentioned to you last time, where Moshe says that for a Masari on a bird, you can't just go with a name. Okay, just knowing that the name of the bird, if I remember he was talking about a pheasant, which one of those is that? This one is the pheasant? This one's the pheasant, I think? This one. So Moshe said, they said, I think it was a pheasant they took to Moshe, they said that we heard that we had a Masari that was kosher, and among the things he said is that just knowing the name is not enough. Okay, and last time we have an example, and here's an even better example, is that quail, the name quail refers to dozens of birds. Okay, because basically what happens is anytime someone sees a small bird, they say, oh, that's a quail. Okay, they small like roundish. The birds are like round. They're not small like pigeons. They're like small, like wool. I almost brought one in for you. I was going to bring you a live one from Yisrael Goldstein. But then they small little birds, and when you look at the bird. Another little bird that looks like it for most people, a little bird is a quail. That's what they just call it. A little bird they call a quail. So the word quail means a zillion things. Okay, so that tells us that's actually reinforcing what Moshe said. The fact that I know the name doesn't mean anything. The fact that you haven't asserted that quail is kosher and I find the bird called a quail doesn't mean anything. Okay, so the truth is probably all those little birds are probably a good chance they're kosher. But Rabbi Leiki tells us, Rabbi Leiki, our expert, tells us that the one that we have a Masarah for is one kind, and a few that branch off of that are very similar to it, okay? And that one is, now the 5 eggs that you have in this case over here are all called quail eggs, okay? They're all called quail eggs. The one that, and you'll see in a second a significant difference from what's going on here, okay? The one over here, this is the one, it's called Caternix. Okay, I'll try to get it out. This one's called Caternix. It's called Caternix, go figure. And this one, what? Yeah, that's the official Latin. It's called European quail. This is the one that we have a Masarah for. Okay? This is the one. It doesn't always look like this. You shouldn't say, oh, if it has these dark black, brown spots, that's me. Some of the guys coming out of Caternix are not as dramatic as looking as this. Okay? But the other one, and this is a common one that people sell in the market. Okay? The other common one that people sell in the market is called, this is going to be hard to get out, it's called bob-white quail. Okay? That's another one. Okay, now you see a very dramatic difference between them. Okay? All the other quail eggs that we have here, this one is called a valley quail and a Gamble's quail and a button quail. Okay? But all these different ones that are here, they all have one thing they seem to have in common is they all have these spotted shells. Okay? You see the shells are all of them are spotted in different amounts. Okay? And even the same bird doesn't always have the same spots, but they're all spotted. Look at the bob white egg. It looks like a chicken egg. I mean, it's not very tiny. But it's white. It's completely not spotted at all. Okay, so on that, we do not have a Messiah for it. So that's not enough to go by. Don't walk into the store and say, okay, if I pick up a box of quail eggs, I say, oh, if it's spotted, it's kosher, and if it's white, it's not. That I don't think is a siman muvuk to know that it's kosher. It is a siman, I don't know if that's a siman muvuk, which is to say is that two things. First of all is, when the Shulchan Aruch said you could buy eggs that are matzu beinenu, and without knowing any rayas, can't do that. Okay, you can't go ahead and into the store and just buy quail eggs and just say, well, quail eggs are kosher, because it's not true. And also is that when the Shulchan Aruch said, if the person tells you, he has to tell you the exact bird and tell you, this bird, it comes from a specific bird that's kosher. In this case, if you bought a duck egg and they said, this is from a mallard duck, that's what the Shulchan Aruch said. If they give you the exact, and they tell you, this is the duck and it is, you're allowed to buy it. If they say duck, that's not enough. You didn't tell me enough information when you said the word duck. And the same thing they say quail, well, quail can mean any of these or half a dozen other ones. Okay, so saying the word quail is not yet a tzayid telling you that it's a kosher bird. He hasn't told you enough information to know that it's a kosher bird. So really, you have to know what kind of quail it is. And effectively, for people like us, that means it's being taught at hashgacha. Okay, so Rabbi Loiki is in charge of eggs for the OU, as you might have guessed. He's in charge of eggs for the OU, and so when they give hashgacha on quail eggs, it's because he approved them. He knows, he could tell one species from the next, and he says, this is the one we have to serve from, this one is not. If you're selling these kind of eggs that's kosher, that we'll give hashgacha for. When Yisrael Goldstein wanted to start raising quail, and he chefs them, and he eats the eggs, and he's just, whatever, that's what he does with things. So he had Chaim Lucky approve it for him first. Okay, just tell me he has a rule, because if you walk to the store and say, I want to buy a quail, doesn't mean you're going to get the right one. So effectively, that means for us is we need to buy quail eggs as an example, but the Mechaber said in Halacha Aleph, that we have to buy eggs only with very specific simanim or certain rayas that it's kosher. In Halacha Beis, he only was matir, so to speak, regular, like chicken eggs. But when you get to something like a quail, then you can't buy it.